Hey everyone, Walsh here from Thin Line Defense. I hate to report, but I'm once again opticless on my P320. We were out recently and we were doing some reviews of the Wilson Combat Grip Module for the P320, and the Holosun 507c just died on us. So we thought it was kind of weird, maybe just the battery ran out. So, of course I had a couple extra batteries in the bag. So we threw another battery, no problem. So we kind of continue on with the review, shooting a couple more times, and then optic dies on us again. Again, super weird. Switch out to yet a third battery and everything seems fine again. I think to myself, well, this is a little odd. Let's try out the first battery again. Suddenly all the batteries work just fine. So it's a little bit confusing. So I reach out to Holosun. I say, hey, I had this issue, and this is with the Holosun 507c version 2, so the V2. So I would have thought they had fixed all the other issues. They had already replaced my 507c version 1 for a similar issue. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, I had this issue with the battery. It seems like it's good now. I just want to let you know kind of what happened. And they responded and they're like, you know what? If you could please send that to us immediately, because we want to look at it, do some warranty work, and we want to make it right for you. So, I was thinking, well, this isn't that big of a deal. It's kind of frustrating. I'm losing a little bit of confidence in the optic, but it's not that big of a deal. It's working now, and we fired a bunch of shots afterwards and didn't have any issues. But they wanted to have that optic. So they were really quick again. I want to go over the Holosun warranty experience. So I believe once again it was on a Thursday when I contacted them. So Thursday I let them know. They said, hey, bring it, send it to us, fill out the RMA sheet. I had it in the mail to them that Thursday. They received it the next Monday, and then they determined that something was up with the optic where they wanted to replace it under warranty. So they did replace that optic with the Holosun 507c X2. Now, we're going to go over some of the differences. We'll unbox it and take a look at it. So the X2 is a little bit different. There was some litigation, so they had to change some of the button placement. I'm not a huge fan of companies that choose to litigate instead of innovate, but that's a different conversation. It is what it is. I don't think there's any problems with the buttons. I kind of did like the version 2 buttons a little bit better. They're a little bit easier to use, but I don't mess with it enough. Usually I leave it in auto mode, or I set it in a particular setting and I leave it alone. I'm not constantly pressing the buttons, so it's really not a game changer at all. So the whole process, again, I think it took about 10 days, maybe a little less than 10 days. So both of my experiences with Holosun have been amazing. They've been the ones that have said, hey, no, we want that optic. We want to take a look at it. We want to make it right. Where I've kind of been like, it's not that big of a deal. So about 10 days both times though, so awesome turnaround. I would be a bit disingenuous if I wasn't a little concerned about having my third optic in 6 months. That's a bit of a problem, but it's hard for me to complain when every single time I have an issue, they just take a week and just give me a new one. So it's really hard for me to be upset when the customer service is to the level where they're going to take care of me and take care of my optics and make sure that I'm always set up well. So they know if there's anything wrong with the optic, they're just going to get me another one and get me all set up. So let's go over the unboxing of the 507c X2. I'll show you how to install it, and then we'll go over some of the differences between the X2, the version 2, and then kind of the version 1 also. So let's get to it. So here's the box we just received in the mail. I'm excited to open this up and get this reinstalled on the gun. So here we got the 507c package all wrapped up nicely. And as you can see here, they changed out the 507c version 2. They actually got the new upgrade, so this is the 507c X2 like we talked about. So let's go ahead and see what's inside the box and see if they've made any changes or if they included anything different. So they have the same normal packaging that they always come with. We also have our instructions where we kind of go over some of the changes. We can see what's new with it. Also, here are your screws, so make sure to pay attention to which screws you're going to need. It's super important later that you install the correct ones, so please pay attention. These are the small ones, then you can also have the big ones. Here we also have the tool that comes with the Holosun 507c. This is super useful as it allows you to access the battery tray and tighten down the optic. And then we also have another cleaning cloth, which is super useful. We only have 100 of those. And now let's take a look at the actual optic, the 507c X2 version. So they changed it from the version 2 where they had the buttons going up and down, and now on the X2 they go side to side. It's not that big of a deal like I've said, but definite change. The housing looks similar. They still have the same version 2 battery tray, which is awesome because it makes accessing everything so much easier. Other than that, the whole housing looks very similar. I swear it's a little bit smaller though, but maybe that's just me. Also included is an extra battery, so let me show you how to install that real quick. In order to install the battery, you just need to get the tool and the optic. You're going to use the flat tip portion here on the battery tray, and you can just unscrew it. It takes just a moment. Just know that this screw is super hard to keep tabs on, so be careful. I'm going to lose this, I'm sure of it. And in the tray, you can just slide it right on out. Now, if you look closely, there's actually markings on the tray which shows you where the positive and the negative is. So just make sure to line that up with the battery. I generally get this wrong, as I always say, so just pay attention to what you're doing. And then you just slide the battery tray into the actual optic, and then just reinstall that super tiny screw. Just make sure you don't just make sure you don't lose the screw, which I swear I'm gonna lose this thing later. I really wish it was had some sort of retention somehow. Then you tighten everything down, and then all you gotta do is press the power button on the side, and as you can see here, we got our optic working perfectly, and you can see the illumination and the actual red dot right here on the optic. So I kept getting really frustrated on how to get the battery tray out. I think that was one of my biggest complaints about the version 2. So it really does help to actually read the instructions. So as you can see here in the actual instructions, it shows you that there's a little tab on the battery tray where you actually insert the tool that's included. So when you insert the tool into the battery tray, you can easily remove it. I still dislike how there's the tiny small screw. There's no real retention for it. I almost lost it twice out at the range. So be careful with that small screw. I'm sure I'm gonna lose it and need to contact Holosun and get another one. But now you know there's a much easier way to get the battery tray out. I had been just banging it on my hand and hoping it came out. It didn't work very well, so now I know the proper way to do it. So let's go over all the things you're gonna need in order to install the optic. So first thing, let's check over the instructions and see what we should do first. So first, we want to remove the screws shown in figure 1 and remove the rail, which we've already done. The mount has been removed. So next, place the Holosun C on a compatible slide cut. So here we have our slide cut that's been installed for an RMR or Holosun adapter. Here you see how it says to use the supplied screws and tighten it down to 15 inch-pounds, and also use a thread locker. So this is super important that we use thread locker. Also here, verify proper clearances and firearm function prior to use. So here we're looking at the screws we're going to be using in order to install this. Pause. See those little tiny screws I used? This is why test fit is so important. Those were the wrong screws. So please make sure to take your time. I had to reinstall the whole thing because I grabbed the small screws instead of the appropriate screws. So do a test fit, install it correctly. Don't use the wrong size screws. Too long and you can jam up operation. Too short and the whole optic is going to go shooting off the edge. So don't do what I did. Install the right ones. For installation, you're going to need your screws, the tool, a Torque bit for the torque wrench. This is a number 10, I believe. You're going to need some Loctite, obviously the optic, the rail, and then the adapter, and a torque wrench. This is super important because you need to torque it down to the correct value, and the tool is not going to put you in the right place. Make sure you use the thread locker. Now, when using the thread locker, you're going to want to just use a very small amount. Don't go crazy with this. Just a small drop is going to get you a long way. Now that we have the 507c all installed, we need to adjust the zero. So you can turn it counterclockwise to go right, and then clockwise to go left. Now remember though, this is changing the point of impact. It's not changing where the reticle is going, so pay attention to that when you're changing it around. Also on the top here, you have the elevation adjustment. You can adjust it clockwise to go up, and then counterclockwise to go down. Again though, you're moving the point of impact and not where the reticle is actually moving. You may also want to put a small dab on the screws to make sure they're not backing out, and you have a visual way of checking that. Here you can see the actual reticle. They maintain the same features where you can change it from the circle and dot to just the dot, and then change it to the circle with no dot in the center, and then back to circle and the dot. The circle and the dot is my favorite. So now that we have our 507c X2 installed, let's talk about some of the generational differences and some things you can see as you move up in the different versions. So in the version 1 of the 507c, they had the battery tray on the bottom, but they had the same buttons as the X2, the same button location. The battery tray being on the bottom was useful in that it used a 2032 battery, but it really stunk when you had any sort of battery issue. You had to remount everything, let all the Loctite dry. Usually took some time. If it happened out at the range, you you were kind of dead in the water at that point. There's no real way you could fix it because you had to remove the optic. So in the Holosun 507c version 2, they changed it so that the battery tray was actually on the side instead of on the bottom. This made life so much easier. So if you had some sort of problem, you can really just switch the batteries in and out. And now that we know how to actually remove the battery tray the appropriate way, it makes it even simpler so you're not banging on your sight in the middle of the range. But it did use a 1632 battery, which means there's a little bit less battery life and they're a little harder to find, but it's not that big of a deal. So then we move into the X2. So on the X2, they no longer have the buttons that were up and down on the weapon, but are now side by side again like they originally were on the version 1. As I said before, this isn't a big deal, particularly with the new feature of the X2, the 507c X2. The feature is the lockout, so I'm going to show you that. So you usually only had 2 modes, which was the auto mode and the manual mode. And in most situations, I really recommended most people run it in the manual mode because you'd come into some situations with the auto where you would actually aim from a dark area into a light area, and the optic wouldn't adjust properly. Now the 507c X2 and the 507c version 2 were both much brighter than the version 1, so it didn't really have this problem as much, but it was still there. You would aim from dark into light and the optic wouldn't be quite bright enough, and when you go into a light area it would become washed out. So what I recommended to most people was to put it in manual, so you had a good in-between, a spot where you could still see, a spot where it wasn't gonna blind you in the daytime, but still at night you could still see it. So it was a good medium ground where it worked in 90% of all situations. The new mode they changed it to is the lockout mode. So in this one, you set what brightness you want in manual and then hold down the plus button one more time, and this actually puts it in the lockout mode. This actually locks that brightness, so no button presses or anything will do anything at all until you switch it out of that mode. It won't turn it off on accident, and I've had plenty of instances where I've accidentally turned off the optic thinking oh no, it died. No, you just turned it off when you were moving the slide. Your hand was on the actual minus button and you turned the whole optic off. So the lockout feature is super useful. So that is actually my new recommendation. I highly recommend the 507c X2 for the lockout feature, because then you can just set your exact brightness that you want for your red dot, switch it over to the lockout mode, and then you're just all done. So feature-wise, the lockout mode is the really only difference between the 507c version 2 and the X2. It still had the same increased auto brightness level, same crispness. It had the same crispness of the version 2, so it's a really amazing optic. Maybe it's just me, it seemed like the housing was changed just a little bit to be a little bit shorter. I need to put the 2 side by side to really see though, but it does seem to be, there seems to be a little bit more space between my suppressed iron sight optics now where it can see over the optic a little bit better, but maybe that's just me. So I hope this review is useful. I hope you can see kind of what you would expect if you use the Holosun warranty. I keep running into issues where the optic just keeps dying, but I could switch out batteries and then it works just fine. So it's a little bit confusing. It concerns me a little, but Holosun just keeps replacing the optic and they keep making it right. So I'm gonna keep using them because they keep taking care of me. So I really don't have any complaints that they're just gonna spend a week and then just send me another optic. Not a problem with me. I do use my optic a lot, and my optic does see a lot of rounds, sees a ton of dry fire, but not a lot of rounds, which is a little confusing. So what's the plan for this optic? I'm certainly not going to baby it. I kind of want to see what happens when you use the optic. I usually carry the gun. This is my regular carry gun. The optic's with me on the gun at all times. So let's just see what happens, and I'm going to give another update in about 6 months and let you know if I'm going to be stuck with yet another new version of the 507c. So as always, thanks to our Patreon supporters. They're the ones that make these reviews possible. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I love interacting with you, and you're what is making this channel great and making it enjoyable for me. So please, please, please keep it up. All right, everyone. Take care.